Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Eamon Lenihan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for ISDM Solutions. We want to welcome you to our webinar. This is the first of a series of webinars that we'll be carrying out in association with Omnia Health and Informa. Just by way of setting the scene for what we will be discussing today, I just want to play a short video and then I will do some introductions and then frame the sort of the content around the webinar and hopefully welcome some questions for you towards the end of the webinar or throughout the webinar. So if we could play the video, that would be great. Okay, as I said, thanks very much for taking the time out to join us today on our webinar. We want to discuss obviously how companies in the diagnostics sector and industries can leverage innovative collaboration technologies to help streamline workflows. Obviously, to look at the relationship between remote working Salesforce guys going out to the market to obviously build new business or keep that relationship with new customers. One of the things that we will discuss as we go through this is just how this technology and the expertise and the consultation process that ISDM delivers can actually help integrate within your chosen sphere of expertise. What I will do here is make a few brief introductions just around the speakers. One of our owners and CEO is Rory Brannigan. Rory leads the sales and partnerships programs within ISDM. He's over 25 years experience within the AV industry, and he is at the forefront of delivering those cutting-edge solutions that we will be discussing to all types of businesses, and that includes existing customers within the pharma and biosciences industries, through to fashion, and basically any industry, regardless of how big or small. Rory has the expertise and the drive to ensure that there's the correct solutions for those industries and those customers. I'll also make an introduction to Rob Taylor, who's our head of sales. Rob is a microbiologist by trade. Having worked his way through the laboratory, he's progressed a career obviously in sales, and he leads our global sales teams within ISDM on developing those key partnerships to really add value to our partners and to the customers that we work with. And myself, my name's Eamon Lenihan. As I said at the start, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at ISDM. I'm a chartered marketer with 18 years experience. More recently, my experience has been within the pharma and CRO sectors, but very recently, before taking up my position as CMO, I worked as marketing director for the largest diagnostics company within the UK. I was at the forefront of the national government scheme for COVID testing. I also served as an active member on the AACC Corporate Advisory Board, and I know that from discussions with colleagues within the IVD industry that the technology is completely inherent and extremely important to delivering world-class, top-quality products to your customers, which ultimately will impact and have a positive impact on the patient, which is exactly why we're here. As I said, I've recently taken over the role as Chief Marketing Officer, so I have a very deep understanding of the pain points that diagnostics companies are faced with, and not more so than the challenges faced now with the pandemic, and how those restrictions have a real impact on how businesses within the sector can actually carry out the research and development and the regulatory requirements right through to delivery of product. So I'm very passionate about having a solution that really fits within the industry. As I said, we have a deep understanding through our own customers in the pharma and life sciences industries, not to mention the other customers within other sectors. But I feel that with my 10 years experience within my previous role and other roles prior to that, we hopefully believe that we can give you a very top line overview of what it is that we do. Rob will discuss the different elements as we go through the webinar, but we want to engage in conversation, so please feel free throughout or at the very end if there's questions that you have to ask. We really want to get into the detail in this, and that's key to us working with Informa and Omnia Health. Again, I've forged a relationship with Omnia and Informa over the last 10 years, and have been integral in working with those guys on solutions for diagnostics companies, and it made sense that we could reach out and work with Informa again to speak directly to you guys, to show you that there's technology and there's innovations that exist today that are both future-proof, but that are easily integrated within systems that you have in place, and that can have a very, very positive impact on your business. So that's just by way of brief introduction. What I will do is I will set the scene in terms of what will be discussed by the other two speakers, and what we've done is to keep this concise and to keep it focused. We've selected 3 areas that of the business that we see have a big impact on how you do business and how we can assist. So obviously COVID has thrown up many challenges, but it's not all negative. By way of the laboratories have probably been busier than they've ever been. at the minute in terms of the throughput, in terms of the R&D element of the laboratory work, with bringing COVID tests to the market, be it real-time PCR tests, or whether it's clinical chemistry tests, or even molecular tests. And I know that it's a very competitive market out there, but also in terms of for any of the QC manufacturers that are out there developing quality control materials to obviously support the accuracy of the tests that are actually being developed. We did some research before obviously starting the webinar and the series of webinars that we wanted to carry out. And there's been a very recent study in November of last year that was carried out by Accenture, and they talked to a whole ream of healthcare professionals and clinicians being very much at the forefront of those, obviously because it's the diagnostic information that allows the physicians and the clinicians to make robust, accurate and very rapid diagnosis. But interestingly, 69% of those that were interviewed said that they wanted to see a digital education on products. And when you think of that in the context of the sales function, without being able to go and meet lab managers, lab directors or purchasing people or specific key stakeholders within public or private laboratories, it's very difficult to show and highlight the unique selling points of what the products are. And purely from a sales point of view, that can be detrimental, because if you can't effectively highlight those unique selling points, then it's very, very difficult for you to have exponential growth. 65% of those people that were interviewed want specific information on products associated with or relative to COVID-19. That's not necessarily a surprise. I think everybody here would agree that's probably what we'd expect. But again, that comes through to any reagents that are being developed for acute respiratory conditions. Obviously, I mentioned the quality control materials that would need to be developed again to really support the accuracy of the COVID-19 tests that are being developed. But also, when you look at EQA schemes and external quality assessment is a huge part of this. So again, these are all relative products that that I know that the attendees today are involved in developing. So again, if that can't be presented to customers or key decision makers, again, purely from a sales point of view, that has a very detrimental effect on exponential growth. But also, again, as we alluded to, all of these products serve to inform the clinicians to ensure better patient outcomes, and again, that's a big thing to consider. And then another 65% had said that they wanted information that would help users access laboratory information and tests, and I think what that involves around, again, is just the ease of access to specific data, and how quickly and securely that data can be transferred from the hospital laboratories or whatever laboratories running the tests within specific hospital ecosystems right through to the clinician, and again, which will support better patient outcomes. So just a very, very quick infographic. 87% of those interviewed on the same study had said that they want to have a mix of either virtual or in-person meetings. So we're not, as a company, naive to know that personal interaction, has to come back and will come back. And there's a lot to be said to have a handshake and develop a really strong relationship with either your key suppliers or your customers. But I think what we've seen with the likes of Siemens Healthineers coming out and stating that the 5 days a week going back to the office is now pretty much null and void, that we're entering into what's now been sort of deemed as this hybrid model. So it's not necessarily that we go digital and then we stay digital, but that there will be a mix. So that's very, very important to sort of to keep at the forefront of your mind as we go through the presentation. And interestingly, only 10% of those healthcare professionals that had actually been interviewed want to go back to the pre-COVID norms. And I think we can all agree that those norms pre-COVID are probably defunct. I think that the way in which we work, the way in which we interact, the way that people can access laboratories or any white rooms is going to change irrevocably, and I think that that's just the way that the industry, and not just IVD, but any industry is going to move forward. So again, when it comes to the footprint and the assets and the sites that companies like yourselves have, it's important to obviously consider the social distancing aspect. If your teams are hot desking or going back to the office, but if they're also working from home and remote working, some of the things that collaboration tools can really assist with is if you rely heavily on paper trails, being able to streamline a document repository where that can be, as I said, easily accessed and very securely accessed. That's a big thing. And obviously a very obvious benefit here is cost savings that can be transferred back into R&D via travel restrictions. Obviously, with the global pandemic has really tightened the amount of what's deemed essential travel. So if your sales guys or your business development teams are able to reach out to new potential customers or existing customers via very innovative, collaborative, interactive tools and technology, then the need to travel as regular is reduced. Therefore, cost savings can be seen there, but also then that can be then put back into the research and development of some of the key assays and reagents and quality control material that's being developed. And again, one of the other things in terms of from an audit perspective, which we will touch upon, Rob will go into more detail, is around a centralized communication system. Again, it means that you've got full access and full audit trails to ensure that nothing's missed, and key information is readily available. And just to point out as well, we're not advocating that we will come in and completely change any systems that you have in place. Legacy systems don't always have varying permission levels, and again, this comes from if it's a lab technician through to an R&D scientist through to maybe a science R&D manager or director. The information that's needed for the sales function to carry itself out has to be stored securely, and there, varying levels of permissions can be there. So we can integrate with whatever systems that currently exists within your global sites if it's harmonized, but also if you've got different sites within different countries working with different communication tools, it's something that we can review and really form a strong strategy from a communication point of view, which will then really impact positively on how the sales function works and how you keep in touch and keep the conversation going with your customers and potential customers. One of the biggest things that we have seen from a restrictive point of view is the ability for auditors to get to sites to ensure that products are at a level where they can be deemed ready to go to market. And I've taken the BSI just as a very broad church statement, but they carry out roughly about 35,000 audit days per year. And the challenge with that is if they can't get to site, and there's quite a restriction around what information can be shared via telephone or via maybe some of the more antiquated collaboration tools, it's very difficult for that audit process to work effectively, and ultimately has a negative impact on when those products actually come to market. A practical challenge around this is there poor Wi-Fi if you're involved in creating, manufacturing and developing clinical chemistry analyzers or any kind of analyzer. Noise within the manufacturing environment might be difficult for an auditor to carry out effective interviews with stakeholders, and again to review quality procedures, both from an external point of view, but also from an internal quality management system perspective. And again, if there's manufacturing sites across the world, it can be difficult for auditors to get to those sites, and obviously timely. So again, those kind of restrictions can have a significant backlash on the product development and the introduction to those products to the market. And obviously, for any of the attendees today who are operating within Europe, we have the IVDR, which is something that I was very close to in my previous role before it's rolled out next year. We're already seeing a backlog with the notified bodies, being able to get the sites to really to ramp up these audits and to ensure that accreditation is done correctly. So it's just something to be in mind that technology is available, it's there, it's robust, it's secure, and it means that it can really help with the audit trail and the audit and regulatory accreditation of the products that need to be brought to market. And then finally, what we will discuss will be the impact that it has on the laboratory. As I said, Rob will go into more detail on this, but the diagnostics industry is rooted in science. It's rooted in the laboratory, and one of the things that we're seeing, a phrase that is coined, I won't take credit for this, but it's the collaboratory. So this is where we're seeing laboratories combining the interests of the scientists and those who are using the laboratory, and combining that with engineering and computer innovations and technology that integrate within the lab, and actually really support the scientific process and the progress of science, and again, which we will talk about once we get to that area. But what we have sort of seen and what we can sort of pull out as being sort of challenges for the lab managers, it's maintaining and articulating the clear vision to staff across multiple sites. And as I said, a lot of these companies that are here today and the diagnostics industry as a whole will have sites across numerous countries and numerous jurisdictions. Many of them will be running simultaneous experiments on the same product, which requires a lot of meetings. And I've seen this personally. I've been involved in those meetings where data is scrutinized, trends are identified, anomalies are discussed, and typically that involves getting to a boardroom and having maybe 15, 20 people in a room together. And as I said, with current sort of global environment as it is, not necessarily the case that this is going to be the way it can move forward. So it's a huge part of how the laboratory throughput, the efficiencies that this can affect, but also in terms of sort of the day-to-day ins and outs of the laboratory, and Rob will discuss this in more detail in terms of de-garning specific health and safety requirements within the laboratory, and how this technology and can be integrated within the laboratory ecosystem for really effective and efficient results. But then there's also the occupancy levels within laboratories. Testing has to go on. If anything, testing has now been thrown to the fore. I think the importance of diagnostics has maybe not been given the due praise that it needed. And I think with COVID-19 being such a prolific, it's a huge talking point globally. And I think what it's done is it's moved the diagnostic conversation to the very, very fore, and people have become very aware of this. So obviously with the labs, if anything, the labs have had to increase because COVID testing is a huge part of that. But I know that with the aging population, with cancers, with diabetes, new esoteric tests are being developed all the time. So that requires staff within laboratories to work effectively. And again, if there's current restrictions now, but also maybe occupancy levels to be reviewed going forward, there's a lot of information that can be gathered through the technologies and the innovations that we can discuss that will allow lab managers and directors to make really informed decisions around that. So just to cap it off, we will be discussing the three areas that I mentioned. It's the impact on the sales function and business development, the audit impact, and obviously then importantly the impact on the laboratory. So without further ado, I will pass over to Rory Brannigan. our CEO, to give you just a bit of a background in terms of ISDM's inception and how the company began and where we are today. Rory.
Hello everyone. Let me try that again. I've just unmuted. Trust me to make a mistake right at the start. Discovery is very much part of ISDM's DNA. Our discovery relies on people within organizations telling us or sharing with us what their pain points are in terms of their ability to collaborate and communicate. We understand what the technologies are out there, but people using the technologies is far more important to us. So user experience. Does the technology that we champion therefore have an impact on the day-to-day of an individual? So we refer to it within the business as a day in the life of. So from the moment you get up in the morning and have your first cup of coffee to how your day plans out or how it proceeds. Things that we've uncovered in multiple organizations across multiple industries to date have been, when you walk into a space and it's got technology into it, how do you use that technology? How intuitive is it? How easy is it to use? And how do you take into consideration the cultural implications of a different geographical workforce, of people of different demographics, different age groups, different challenges coming in everywhere? How do you make sure that, for example, if it's a meeting where there's very clearly there are externals and internals, how do you make sure that you can immediately go to the technology and share the data that you want to share and make that say it's an hour-long meeting, make that as efficient and effective as possible? A lot of the time, what we discover when we go into organizations is that the process of starting the meeting can take anything up to 15 minutes before people are comfortable and they've got settled into the space that they're working in to do that. I appreciate that's external to the lab, but a lot of the success that we've had since we began in 2012 has been in the biopharma space. What we've actually, with our dedication to understanding pain points within organizations, what we've been able to do for a lot of biopharmas on a global level, we've now worked with biopharma in over 50 plus territories, countries, if you want, across the world. We work with building refurb, we work with building design, we work with new builds, we work with lab space, we work with internal space where we've been heavily involved in large R&D facilities. But the key to it all is the people who are going to work there across multiple departments. It's always the key to the success or failure of what we do. So what we like to remove complexity. We like to get under the skin of what's actually required. You know, is it what level of data share is required? What level of information is needed in the space? How do you control the square footage within the space? How do you make sure that you're maximizing the potential of the space? And how do you capture the very essence of what people want to do within any space, whether that be an open space or a closed space? We're very conscious of security, compliance, and governance. And we have many examples where the work that we've done has been quoted as saving, with significant savings of up to 25% on sustainability programs, for example, reducing carbon footprints, reducing the journey to net zero that we're all on. We're very conscious of the impact that voice can have and will have, but we're also aware of where it's at in the journey at the moment. That said, there are a lot of, if we look at the large behemoth players in our industry, you're looking at Microsoft, you're looking at Cisco, you're looking at Zoom, you're looking at Pexip, and many, many others. But the reality of all of those coming together is what are they actually offering that impacts positively on the requirements of an organization? Within biopharma and many others, we're very conscious that if we can reduce the time it takes to get to market, if we can enhance the patient journey, if we can create communication that sticks, if we can create communication that's easy with like a one button to push is something that we talk about. So you can go in and start a meeting from a single button, whether in an open or enclosed space. The speed with which you can get from one space to another within multiple buildings that you may be in charge of. The industry will call it something like wayfinding or map finding or mapping a presence. But how does that become something that's usable, something that's intuitive, something that the business, you know, can you bring it down, for example, to the devices that we use every day, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's an iPad, whether it's a laptop. So there's a lot of complication in IT from our point of view and in audiovisual technology that doesn't need to be there. We see that as our R&D. That's our responsibility to create the journey that works for the organizations that we work with. So we bring it down to a level of, we do a lot of intense information gathering at the front end, which we call driving for a sustainable outcome. What we mean about a sustainable outcome, it's on a number of levels. It's got to be something that's bulletproof, that's robust, that it's future-proofed. It can allow the organization to build onto it. It can add further things in. We're very conscious about the importance of square footage, the importance of measuring how space is used, how it's managed. When we talk about the hybrid environment that we will inevitably be, that a lot of organizations are inevitably looking at as we return to work from the pandemic, how do you measure people to desk? How do they book a desk? What impact it has on things like cleaning schedules? How can we, as Eamon mentioned about degowning, how can we, what's relevant in that space? One of, you know, if you're looking at diagnostics and you want people to turn up, it's something as simple as you've allocated a car parking space. They know exactly where to go. The information that could be potentially app driven or other tells them exactly how to get to the building. They know exactly where they're going within the building. They know exactly how to get there. It could be that they're remotely communicating or collaborating from home. So what does that look like? How clear is that journey? How clear is that communication? How clear is that collaboration? That requires a lot of fact finding, a lot of information gathering. And then, you know, technology is only at its best whenever it enables, like anything else. No matter what way you come out of any discovery journey, there has to be an advantage to it. So we see it as our role to make sure that we have a complete understanding of what a space looks like. And we understand that space is different. For example, one space isn't the same as the next. There might be a uniformity of look and feel. There might be a uniformity of product set within that space. There might be smaller or larger, but all of those things need to be taken into consideration so that people, whenever they're turning up to work, they know exactly what they're coming into. It's got a look and feel that they're familiar with, that they can use, and offers them an advantage. So all of those things really are what drives us as a business. It's why we started. It's why we believe we've been successful, because we become an extension of the customers that we work with. We become the voice of the customer, and we hope that the testaments we have from many customers support, you know, what we say to people or the way that we talk about things. So very briefly, you know, at the bottom, discovery, initiation, delivery, support. Those are things we could talk in great detail about, but the reality is it's all about what are the pain points, what needs to be done. Is it a case of that the technology that's currently being used to create an advantage is so disparate that it isn't uniform enough to create the advantage that the organization's looking for? So that requires somebody that requires a partner or a strategic alliance to be set up between partner and organization to establish what the ground rules are and what actually needs to happen. And then it's about the design, the professionalism and the specialisms coming into play to show that that is achievable on the back end and how that's achievable. So that's very briefly who we are. You'll hear, hopefully hear streams of consciousness coming from Rob that support that as we move on into the next phase of the webinar. But I would, of course, welcome any questions, and there's so much we could talk about, and sometimes an hour doesn't seem enough, which is why we've set up a series of the webinars. And your feedback and helping you with the science really is very, very important to us. You're the people we want to talk to, we want to understand more, and then we want to be able to say, have you considered? And we want to show you what we've done already, and what might help. And we also want to bring to the table anything about your futures, so we can help to bring this collaboration and communication world alive through these webinars, hopefully over a period of time. So thank you for your time, and I'll pass on to Rob now, if that's okay.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about some of the things we have done across the life sciences segment and across diagnostics businesses. And as the guys have mentioned previously, we're working towards better patient outcomes and looking what the future roadmap for your business can look like. So what I'd like you to think about, and please fire questions in on the chat or talk in specifics about any of this or what might be relevant to your businesses. How your current collaboration or technology applications, your practices within the lab spaces, within manufacturing areas, within remote spaces, how they are set today to adapt to new futures. How easy is it going to be to integrate new tech across the field force, across QA work practices? What do you have in place or an understanding of technology that's going to align to attracting and retaining talent, that's going to drive efficiency, sustainability, cost saving, and ultimately increase that speed of product development and efficient working practices, driving those better patient outcomes. It's hugely important that the right technology strategy is adopted there, and that's what we've done for business across biopharma and life sciences segment, allowing that effective communication that's streamlined towards your workforce personas, processes, practices, and simplifying that. So that's what we're looking to do. So one thing that's been absolutely critical, I've read some good articles recently. I know there's some attendees from Roche involved in this these webinar series as well. There's been a lot of research towards engaging talent within your business and looking into that employee user experience. That's what we've done within very specific examples for some of these customers globally. How do we engage as people in science in meaningful work that's going to benefit society? And people are driven by a strong desire to influence the world, particularly in the scientific space. So careers in science have matched those values for new employees joining businesses, and that's something quite key to highlight in this. Have you considered what you're doing in that aligns towards this sort of Gen Y and Z new employee and future workspace? And how accessible is that technology? How simple is it? How easy is it to use? And are you able to standardize it? So that's really key, that your workspace is aligned to those ideals on influencing and innovating and engaging your workforce. Obviously, this has been replicated in research and diagnostic practices recently across companies. We've worked with AZ and hospitals looking into this recently, and it's something that the sort of B2C journey or the business to patient side of your business really identifies with having a need to be involved in a process that you're conducting as a business and understand the outcomes that come out of it. So I just wanted to highlight that before I go into the examples. So the first example we're going to look at and apply these employee user experiences to is the sort of remote working space. So what we've looked at is day in the life of the sales guys in the IVD industry. So typically they're going into hospitals, talking to purchasing departments in those hospitals, and they need to present effectively the benefit of specific products. Obviously, the huge restriction over the past year has been getting access to hospitals, but there's a reticence or a need to drive a new way of working in this space anyway, that being really important to do it virtually. So if you can't communicate effectively, you can't sell, you can't grow. We've put in place standardized home working setups that are integrated with quality collaboration platforms, highly secure, allowing you to engage your employees and the external parties across those borders. That's been a huge competitive advantage to business. How do you get that right in there to drive business growth with your field-based employees? This, in turn, if you are putting in place tech that is standardized internally, has a huge impact on carbon footprint and some of those sustainability goals. So implementing a tech strategy that works here is allow you to achieve business objectives for carbon drops, cost savings on travel. Cost savings mean more research and development, and that means more sales growth, so more products, more general business growth impacting every single arm of the business. And I've alluded to it, but I'll talk specifically. We've looked at very specific patient access or points of care access and facilitating a solution which works with your internal collaboration tools, but also allows you to engage with external people. So customers and suppliers are particularly important, but obviously the patients there are pretty key in getting good data out of. So typically that's been a very challenging area for a lot of collaboration tools to really get in there. You know, having a simple user experience, maybe a click link or tool, which allows somebody external to business join into a meeting, but providing a very bespoke solution or the look and feel of a bespoke solution to an external user allows it to align to your business. So you can white label these solutions, still meet the very high quality standards you have in collaboration, still work within your sort of standard working practice internally, and have a bespoke sort of future focused solution which works and is easy to use and is consistent on a global scale. The second area that Eamon mentioned that we've worked within is looking at the impact of audits, regulation, and how to streamline that. So obviously, a lot of times, particularly with externals, you can't get onto site at the moment. This is something that we've been driving that aligned to those sustainability practices for a while anyway. You know, how can we facilitate this smoothly remotely? One of the biggest gripes that always come across is network integrity. So if we're looking at the QA department persona, we're considering external people as well as internal people. So it's across site, QA managers needing to travel around internally to prep for those external audits, and ensuring the internal processes and approvals for each stage of development are met correctly. They're going to need to engage with multiple sites, multiple departments. Different types of documentation has a big impact in here. So standardizing on a collab strategy and bits of tech that aren't siloed but are linked in allows people to really do that efficiently, allows you to engage with your marketing departments, your sales departments, etc. So Eamon alluded to manufacturing development alone, the 35,000 audits a year on the analyzers. You know, the FDA coming into view, laboratories, audit trails, there's got to be data integrity looked at. So if you can't get onto site, you can't release the product. What we've done is ensure that businesses buddy up to audit bodies. It's absolutely key in facilitating that relationship with auditors. So if you can allow that to happen online, if you can facilitate technology in spaces, wherever that is, that allows people to view it externally in again, a very secure environment, it really eases that sort of audit process and puts you in good stead from day one. So this is, you know, it can be as simple as clicking a link online for an external audience, but seeing a very specific portal which shows access into areas. But internally, it's linked into your whole collab strategy, maybe your chat tools that are in there, your documentation that works beyond it, and then it's facilitated into challenging areas through wearable technology. So for instance, you know, if you have specific manufacturing areas where you need wearable tech or installed technology, it's going to have to deal with noise or challenge sort of remote aspects, Wi-Fi access. It gets past that sort of really big blocker that we have today of physically being there on site. And we've seen some really interesting areas of this that we've worked on for businesses, particularly in the wearable side of things, where we've talked about product development in the lab, sharing that information across teams, as well as capturing that QA process and documentation, facilitating sort of that new technology in there. So that's had a huge impact in those challenging areas. And it's really relevant to the mergers and acquisitions in diagnostics, and that is a heavily regulated, process-oriented part of the business that needs to be looked at safely, securely, and collaboratively. So I suppose really this is the one that's closest to my heart because it's been a long time since I worked in a lab, but looking at efficiencies across the lab and how technology can assist there is really key. And there's a lot of cool tech and innovations here that really have an impact. So some of the areas we've looked at with our customers here, again, around wearables or voice control and things like that, had a real result back to those businesses. So what we're thinking of that persona is how tech can assist in the lab, how you're assessing your inventory, how you're sharing results and data from the lab, how your teams are working with each other. So if you're looking at the scientists or your lab managers, lab directors, how are specialist systems integrating into that day to day? How often they're needing to suit up, de-gown, go in and out of lab environments to conduct the standard sharing of information or documentation. And this is an area that obviously space is at a premium. Analyzers need to be in that premium space. So movement between that environment into an office space or an admin area, working from paper, inputting back into a central system, has been some of the areas we've really looked at and focused on with our customers. There's a lot of weekly, bi-weekly meetings which need to be facilitated, and presentation and data sharing, bringing groups of specialists together is really important. So if we take a future focus here on what exceptional looks like, there's a lot of technology that's invested in the lab. So if we can really concentrate on allowing people to work efficiently and streamline sort of note taking, or we've integrated gesture control, so sterile spaces can be worked within and still collaborated across without the removal of PPE, lab equipment. It doesn't need to be a blocker. We have examples where voice technology, which although has been around for a while, it's becoming more prevalent because of the use of things at home, allowing you to not need that sort of touch use. And we've also looked at how we can integrate touch control technology simply into certain areas as well that allow you to sort of whiteboard or share data in a more functional way. And the key about this is that technology needs to be integrated and doesn't function as a standalone system. You don't want to create different silos because that's going to reduce efficiency in the lab as well. So again, we're talking about increasing speed and efficiency in the lab, and ultimately that ties back into investing in the area. Science is the biggest area of your business. It attracts and retains talent in that industry, and that's a very big challenge for you. And these are big advantages that can be looked at that align to some of those goals of talent attraction whilst reducing inefficient practices across the lab and outside of the lab. Ultimately, we're integrating tech that's specific to your business and people, and it's centered around cognitive principles, how the spaces can be impacted positively. So by taking data out of spaces, people, processes, analyzing and understanding that, we've been able to implement some quite future-focused technologies into lab spaces, standardized home working setups, and look at historically very challenging manufacturing areas or sterile spaces that were then allowed to simplify and work in a uniform way across technology and the processes that people are used to doing there that allows sort of greater collaboration across teams. So whilst we're thinking about the future and what it can look like, we can ensure this secure, high quality, simple user experience. And that's across these sort of areas I've talked about here, how we're looking to reduce noise detection and how that's done automatically, how voice control can be picked up in the right way, how we can use wearables for remote specialisms to join into certain areas, or how smart systems can link into facilities across your spaces and in a secure fashion. And we're going to talk about spaces, space management, and smart building systems in the next webinar actually as well, so I won't go into that. But it's at its core, I'm talking about implementing collaboration strategies that streamline all of this and allow you to get your products out. So understanding where you are today is really important, and taking you through the process to that future state whilst assessing, reporting back and working with you is really important. So as a sort of final tie-up across all of this, it's when we've worked with farmers, life sciences businesses, diagnostics businesses, we're discussing future-focused innovation, and we're doing that completely in a vendor-agnostic fashion. So it is about consultancy and what's going to work for you, and that's why I'd be keen to talk about any specific questions you do have on this, and maybe talk in detail about that. But we're talking about a digital transformation strategy that involves detailed consultancy with you, understanding those business personas that are relevant to you in those processes, what it looks like today, where you've invested across technology as well, but remaining focused on user experience and realizing the value of technologies old and new. We put in place horizon planning, and we link that back to measurable results. So it's although we're driving for innovation, we have to keep that in check, that we are providing outputs that are ensuring you've got a value-based strategic partnership. And we put in place roadmaps for end-of-life technology and manage sort of the end-of-life asset management, researching new tech, when it's going to have the best impact for you, and planning for it, rather than get into that something has come end of life, or there needs to be a very challenging sort of change out of technology when something has come end of support, or you need to fix something. So we look to present our findings in documents back to you as a customer, and how new technologies will work in your existing spaces as a overall a future state document. So I would be keen to understand any specific questions you have about these processes, where we can engage with you. I think I saw something pop up a little bit earlier on before. So Eamon, do you want to talk through what you can see there? I'll try and answer that from our specific customer engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, thanks for going into that that level of detail. As the guys alluded to, we could probably stay here for the next 5 to 6, 7 hours and go through the intricacies of all of these. So as I said, please feel free to reach out either through Informa or through the details that you received for this webinar to ask specific questions. We do have a few questions that came up. Rob, one of the things that seems to be of interest is around the audit software. So the question was, if the auditor doesn't have or support the same software that the company would have, is that a block? And does the auditor have to then download or get the same software for the transaction to be effective?
So in short, no, but it depends on what is implemented and whether you're taking a very internal strategy around collaboration, or whether you're looking to engage with those external profiles. So, I mean, what we've seen a lot of in the last year is obviously telehealth platforms, and white labeling those for businesses, whether that's for hospitals or for specific life sciences companies. But it's facilitating that capturing data of something that's happening externally easily, and then linking it back into your internal collaboration strategy. Historically, that's been really challenging space for your major collab players. Microsoft Teams, it's had a huge rise recently, but it doesn't play very well with external users, and people are really feeling the challenge of that over the last 12 months. So we've got very specific examples where we've built a external front end, and that allows people to simply, whether you're a patient or whether it's working with auditors or working with external suppliers, allows a clicking sort of link that looks has a look and feel of your business, and facilitates that ease of audit or better engagement with a patient, and still works within your collaboration platform internally, whatever that needs to look like for you. So in short, no, it's not a blocker.
Perfect. We've another question just again around the collaboration tools. The question stated that across multiple sites, there's different tools that are already in existence. So is there a way that can be streamlined? So it's just, again, I think Rory alluded to it. It's that one touch. It's easier. Is there a little bit of detail you can give around that? How ISDM can sort of fix that challenge?
Yeah, I mean that's very bespoke to what space you're looking at and what your ways of working are. So for instance, in the lab, we've looked at specific and deployed specific gesture control technologies that allow you to start a meeting without moving out of that space, or integrating simple wearable tech, particularly in merger and acquisition sort of area where you're looking to understand product development processes, without having to spend day in, day out there or work within certain areas. We can facilitate that ease of use through wearables. And a lot of wearable technologies will focus heavily on voice control. So again, the crux of it is having a cloud platform that allows you to integrate these new different types of tech without it being a totally siloed platform. So if you can harness the power of augmented reality technology, wearables, or voice control, and have a standardized cloud platform that's secure and allows that engagement, means you can have very smart tools across your buildings, your facilities, that allow you to start meetings or call out to a remote specialist or facilitate an audit quite easily. But there is a lot of work in getting the basis of that right to allow you to put a plan in place to have some of these quite innovative technologies that facilitate efficiency.
Yeah, and even from I guess from an instrument supplier, and we've referenced the likes of Roche and Siemens and the likes of Sysmex and those companies that have dedicated systems for their reagents. We've alluded to it, and again, you could go into a whole ream of discussion around it. But downtime for any laboratory is a detrimental thing, and it's something that if it's unplanned, it can have a huge impact on the business. But even as a value add, if these instrument sellers are selling their instrumentation in, there's also the whole option of remote diagnostics, that if there's an instrument or there's an error message that goes, and if a scientist is wearing wearables, it's through sort of these safety goggles that have that the augmented reality or that collaboration aspect to it. There's a very strong argument to say that diagnostics of an analyzer in a customer scenario can be fixed or at least reviewed without the need for that engineer having to be called to site as well. So that's something that I think is definitely worth considering.
And that's been a huge use case, not just within life science diagnostics segment as well. That getting remote specialists out to spaces and stopping downtime is huge across obviously any manufacturing or process-driven area of a business. So that's where we've absolutely looked at it for large-scale manufacturers globally and across the pharmaceutical sector, delivering standards that work within that again aren't a bit of kit that functions in one specific space. That means you actually have to work in a new workflow. You drive the biggest efficiencies when you can do that within your existing.
There's also the introduction of companies like Babel Labs and Voicea. The two main cruxes of what they want to do is the background noise is cut out, which is obviously a key. It's been a key pain point for a lot of the organizations that we talk to. The Babel Labs software is very, very effective at doing that. Voicea is one tool of many on the marketplace. So that idea of note capture, that capture the moment type of approach to things, if you can capture that moment, we don't, the work that we've done with science across biopharma, you never know when the eureka moment's going to hit. But what you do want to do is get as close to it as possible and capture it if you can, so that it's not lost. And it's where technology can support with that. So there are quite literally dozens of tools out there, but I suppose the reality is how do you forge them into a single usable format that doesn't create confusion or complexity? That's it.
Yeah, perfect. So I think we're pretty close to the end. And again, I just want to thank Rory and Rob for what I found is a very relevant and very informative subject matter, and one that businesses across multiple sectors within the multiple industries are being faced with. Robin and Rory and myself have alluded to it. We are looking at running a series of these events in the run up to MedLab Middle East, and our next one will be around space management, which I know is very prevalent to office space, but in this sort of context around laboratory and premium space and occupancy levels being managed. So there will be more detail will be forwarded out through Informa and Omnia on that. And as I said, if there's anything at all question wise that is crops up whenever you leave the webinar, please feel free to reach out, and one or all of us will endeavour to answer the question as best we can. We welcome those questions, as Rory said. Our sort of research and development is taking pain points and struggles that end users and customers are facing that we've maybe missed, and really developing an answer to that to ensure that working is flawlessly and seamlessly being able to be carried out to the same level as would be expected in sort of normal circumstances. And as Rob stated, this is the future. This is when we integrate and work with our partners. We partner with you, and we're there for the foreseeable future, and try to build on that. So as I said, we're excited to talk more to you guys. We welcome comments, feedback, and questions, and hopefully we will see you at our next webinar when our date is confirmed. So thank you guys, and thanks everybody for attending.